Everybody safely away from the start. It's Ludwig, Klaus Ludwig, who leads.
All right, Nate, let's talk about this amazing Mercedes 190E. This is something that I actually wanted to feature last time, but it was like half done.
Yeah, it wasn't finished yet. So we had a very courageous expectations of finishing it for the first Circuit Legends, which we thought this car would obviously fit here really nicely. And it didn't come true. So what we did is we actually pivoted, we wrapped the entire car, we got it all set up, and then we basically just parked it and just kind of like opened up the project and really just showed what we were planning on doing to the car. So yeah, we had the engine on the stand, and really kind of talk about the ethos of the project, which was, hey, we grew up, we've all seen golden era of DTM, the E30 M3s and the Kazi Mercedes battling it out. And these cars are now unobtainable. They're $250,000 cars. And we wanted to say like, hey, let's build a car with that in mind, the ethos of that. And that's what this is. We basically the ethos of the whole project was to build a car that we like dream over, but using parts of cars that are just readily available and not go crazy with it. So keep the authentic sort of personality of the car, but maybe not like serial numbers and be all crazy about all the little stuff. So this car started out as a $2,000, grandmother-owned Mercedes 190. It was white, a 2.66 in it, automatic, blue interior, pretty just run-of-the-mill Facebook Marketplace sort of find.
How much did you guys get it for?
$2,000.
Oh, $2,000.
No, then we subsequently found a Junkyard engine from a CLA or an A45 AMG, which is the little 4-cylinder. And really the goal of that was like, hey, this modern AMG engine kind of like feels a lot like what the Kazi engines they put in these things were. So like, how can we fit that in here? No one knew how. We didn't even know what transmission was going to bolt up. Is it going to be a BMW gearbox? Is it going to be something sequential? And we just kind of just problem solved after, one after the other. One of the fun things about building a Mercedes is like, no one does this. There's no book, not like a BMW or a Nissan or anything like that where there's like a book there's not like a book telling you what to do, what works. And so we really had to figure everything out on our own, which made it a lot of fun. And with that, like.
Why do you think that is?
I think that, honestly, the biggest contribution I'd say is like especially in the States, they really marketed themselves 70s and 80s as a super luxury brand. It was all automatic and big cars. And for the enthusiasts, I think BMW took off because there's a lot of sport cars in there. Limited slip differentials are available. The manual gearboxes are all over the place. These cars just didn't have that. Right. In Europe they did, not in the States though.
Right, if they had this and they kept building cars like this, then potentially it would have the same following as Mercedes.
I think if you look in Europe, there is actually this following for Mercedes in Europe. Just in the States, it really is kind of in little pockets. And so yeah, that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to build a BMW beater out of a junkyard Mercedes.
So then, how did you guys get all the body panels then?
So these were all sourced through the Netherlands. There is a couple different kits we could get, and this was the one that was built off the molds that the actual DTM race cars were built off of. So like when you look at the contour of that front fender, that is the actual contour that the race car, that race in DTM had. The front bumpers were all fitted. Obviously they made some crazy changes to the car to sort of homologate it. The splitters and these big arches, they tubbed out the fenders like massively, so they run the cars lower. And yeah, it really it takes something that's pretty tame and just turns it into something that's really awesome.
What are the pieces that come with a kit?
So basically, yeah, it's your bumper, it's your front fenders, side skirts, and then the rear arches, the wing, the rear bumper, basically all of the pieces that kind of go around the car. But they did some pretty crazy stuff to it, lifting everything up. The arches are much higher. You can see like coming to Lime Rock, we actually had to lift the car up a little bit because going up the uphill, we actually drive the car properly. And going up the uphill, we were getting massive rubbing. So we actually had to jack the car up a little bit just to handle that. But yeah, I mean, they were racing these things on the Nürburgring and going as fast and as low as they possibly could to try to get the horsepower advantage in this.
Is this from the Netherlands too?
Yes, everything's from that one kit. And it was actually, dealing with this, like sourcing these things is always fun because it's like you don't know if you're going to get it. You send the money, you're kind of waiting, and that was actually one of the big parts of the build that held us up was getting the body panels and just waiting for them, trying to get everything fit. So.
And what about the livery? What's going on with this livery?
So the livery, this is a partner of ours over at F-Zero is Scheffler, and they're actually a really big corporate German company that sells car parts. So you've probably heard of Ina or Luke Clutches, possibly, more familiar names, but they're all owned by the Scheffler Group. And it's really cool because they actually sent engineers over to talk to us about this project. These guys were the guys that like put wheel bearings on like the first Mercedes cars ever. This is the like Model T of Mercedes. These guys were working on them. And so it's really cool to have that piece of history. The other thing is they actually race, Scheffler sponsors cars in modern DTM. So they're racing cars in modern DTM. So we had that sort of tie back where like, hey, we're kind of going after the golden era of DTM, but you're racing cars nowadays, like how can we tie this together? And they were really helpful. We have a bunch of partners on the car. You know, Toyo gave us some tires, Rotiform made these wheels custom for us.
Yeah, tell me about these wheels. These are like center look?
Yeah, center look, yeah, exactly. Yeah. But yeah, they're really, really awesome. They're made basically to fit the car perfectly.
And they're forged.
Yeah, they're forged, they're proper, and like we wanted to do this sort of, we're actually running AMG C63 brakes on the car, which are massive. And so we wanted an 18 on the car, we didn't want a 19, so it was this big challenge of how do we get an 18 to fit over these huge brakes, and Rotiform was awesome helping us out with that.
What did these race cars run back in the day?
Size-wise, it was 18x9s, which is what this wheel is. And they ran, yeah, mostly Speedline was the manufacturer of the wheels. And so yeah, Rotiform did a really good job of sort of following that trend that Speedline, you know, had. The gold is obviously the Speedline gold, tie over into like Subarus and stuff. And I love how, one of my favorite things as like a motorsport enthusiast, especially of like this era, when you see like the pieces of this that were on the Mercedes and then they jump to Subaru and then they jump to this and whatever, and you see the actual trends of the manufacturers following these things. You know, almost this led the way. And yeah, I look at like cars like this, the E30 M3, you know, you have to question whether we would have gotten the Lancer Evos that were literally named after these cars. You know, it's like all of the spiraling and passion that came around all this stuff, you know, back in the late 80s was really cool to me, and it's something I wanted to celebrate with this car.
Can we take a look at the engine bay?
Absolutely.
So then is the grille stock?
This is the hood and grille stock. This is all standard stuff. These are Euro lights. They would be two-piece if they're North American, but they're readily available. Obviously taping it up a little bit to keep it hot here.
Oh, because it's overcooling.
It's overcooled at the moment right now. So yeah, we have a really effective cooling system. So I really wanted to stack the cooling. So we have the radiator down low, we have an air-to-air intercooler up top. Normally this engine would be water cooled, or sorry, the intercooler is water to air. And so what we want to do is just simplify everything. So
this engine's never meant to be mounted this way.
No, exactly. So this engine would always be 90 degrees from here, and basically, you know, it's found in like, you know, front-wheel drive, all-wheel drive cars. It's a really well-built engine, and honestly, new European cars, not a lot of, well, new cars in general don't come with like a lot of aluminum components in the engine. You look at this as like proper aluminum valve cover, like it feels almost like a twin cam Lotus engine or a twin cam Cosworth engine. Like it's modern, but it still has that sort of retro vibe to it. It has a really awesome turbocharger. We had to flip it 90 degrees. Looks like it got pretty hot today and we actually melted a little bit, so sorry about that. But yeah, so we flipped the turbo 90 degrees. It's actually twin scroll, so it worked really nicely where we just flipped it 90 degrees, kept the twin scroll effectiveness, but just made the clearance we needed.
This is all 3D printed.
This is all 3D printed. So yeah, Alex Nelson, he's one of our engineers over at F-Spiro. And yeah, he did a lot of this really cool, like the heat shielding stuff. We went to Watkins Glen with this car, and I leaned on the hood after a session, and the vinyl was starting to bubble, and my hand burned, and I'm like, okay, we got to do something about that. And so it's sort of been, you know, one of these projects where we've added to. But yeah, we wanted to build something that people could identify with.
This is so neat.
Yeah, so that was a big decision, honestly. Because, you know, a lot of people, they looked at like Ryan's car, you know, his Corolla, stuff like that, and a lot of them are using big, basically aluminum billet pieces across there, and that was what we were originally going to do. And then we're like, no, this is a touring car from the 80s. They would have used tubular steel. It would have been just like all the control arms and all those little bits and pieces that were fabbed in race shops. So we actually built that specifically that way to really tie back to, you know, golden era.
This doesn't even have a fan.
So normally would have a fan. We actually, on the way when we were loading the car up, the radiator cracked. So we had to fab up a radiator last minute and throw it in here. And we did that, and I didn't have time to fab up fan brackets on it.
And it's still overcooled.
It's still overcooled, yeah. So, I mean, you got to keep an eye on the gauge, but it's not too bad.
So then, how many liters is this engine?
It's a 2-liter. So it's a 2-liter direct injected AMG engine, and it can make easily upwards of 380 horsepower.
So then, how much does it make?
Right now, we're running a lower map, so we're probably around 280, 290. We can make a bunch of power with it. So, which really the ethos of this engine and understanding its horsepower curve was, we looked at the Cosworth engines that these cars raced with, and at their peak, we're making 350 horsepower. And so if we could find an engine for $3,000 at a junkyard that we could make the same performance with, that was how we sort of identified how can we keep this thing, you know, just like what would have been, you know, back then. So
The cage work is pretty insane, huh? It goes
So
all the way up.
That's another thing. We got that from custom cages in the UK. It is actually based on the DTM cars. So we did some modifications to it, but really nice cage, and like, you know, really fits well, and like really gives the car, you know, super stiff platform, which you feel when you're driving it.
Let's talk about the interior, if you can open up that side. All business in here.
Yeah, super business. You know, we really wanted to build a car that felt honest, you know, so no power steering, no power brakes. We just have a tilt and pedal set down here.
No power steering on a car this
Yeah.
big? Did they run power steering back then?
Some did, some didn't. So it really depended. I mean, but that's the golden era of racing, right? That was when, I hate to say it, but drivers were sort of like second tier to like the car's performance. And so, you know, we wanted something that, you know, obviously we're not competing with this car, we're just having fun with it. And we wanted to kind of give you that vibe. And you know, I know a couple, you know, we had Road and Track drive the car a couple weeks ago. And one of the best things about it was he was talking to the driver, Kyle, was talking about how he got home and had a bruise on his arm and didn't even realize it because, you know, probably hit a cage or, you know, whatever happened. But like, the car is super authentic to that. Shifter right next to the steering wheel, that's a classic DTM thing. I've seen so many awesome pieces of footage of, like, you know, the quick shifting, the shifter right there, you know, throwing it down.
So what transmission is this connected to?
So that was a big challenge. When we got the engine, this engine's always hooked to like a 9-speed DCT, and we didn't really know what we were gonna do. And so we searched around and we were like, well, we're gonna use a BMW gearbox, we're gonna use a sequential, what are we gonna do? We ended up finding a gearbox out of a manual C300, and we were just like, well, let's just see if the bell housing bolts up. We bolted up and the bell housing fit perfectly.
What?
So
It's almost like...
It's Mercedes. What I've learned, I've built two Mercedes in my life, and what I've learned is they do not change unless they are forced to change. So bolt patterns are always the same. They really try to reuse everything, which makes building the car a lot easier. I think people have identified that with BMWs or Porsches, where they're just use the same stuff over and over again. The big challenge with the gearbox was not the gearbox. Gearbox bolted right up. We had a custom clutch made for it, or custom flywheel, you know, Tilton 7¼ clutch. The big challenge was we didn't have a place for the starter. The engine is front-wheel drive, where the starter lives on the transmission side. The transmission is rear-wheel drive, where the starter lives on the engine side. And now we bolted the two together, but there's no place for a starter to go in between the two.
Right.
So one of the most nerve-wracking parts of building this car was I literally had to build a jig and take a hole saw and bore a hole through the side of the block with a hole saw to allow a starter to basically sit on the side of the engine. And so I'm sitting here with this, you know, engine on an engine stand, and I'm boring with a, you know, hole saw through the thing, which is something I've never done before. But it worked. And, you know, we got the starter in there. It's just a normal C300 starter, and we've never had an issue with it. So
How crazy.
yeah, it was a nerve-wracking moment. I remember doing it. I built the jig to be all careful, and you know,
That is so cool. And then you have a pretty big steering wheel because it needs to be.
Yeah.
You
And
just
actually,
need to have that leverage.
You could see it's starting to peel just from pushing on it so hard. Like, you know, steering was wearing out already. But yeah, it's a pretty big steering wheel, so you have the leverage on it. Obviously, the shifter's right there, and the throw on this thing is like, it's just awesome. You know, here at Lime Rock, going into turn one, you know, you can feel the rear locking up, and you're just kind of popping down the gears. It's really, really great. Billy Deacons over at Sparco did these seats for us custom, which was really awesome. So these are an off-the-shelf Sparco seat, but what they did is they upholstered them without any of the modern graphics on them. So we really wanted that 80s retro vibe where it's just like, just the brand, that's it. But they're carbon Kevlar, which obviously is not found too often these days. I mean, all the old, you know, DTM cars ran carbon Kevlar, so we wanted to keep that in the car.
So neat. Love it, love it. The interior, the finish, everything.
Yeah, I mean, being a touring car, we had to do it white. I mean, that's kind of the way it is. So the car is fully white inside, white everywhere. Obviously under the green wrap is white. You know, original dash just, you know, basically died and bolted back in the car in the lightest way it could be bolted back in here. One of the things I really love about the car, especially driving it, is the stack dash. You know, it identifies with me with like that, you know, 80s, 90s, you know, retro racing. And it honestly, one of the bigger challenges was getting this old analog dash to function with our Motec and everything, and we got it working. And it's awesome when you're, you know, going through the gears and you're seeing it just up at 7, just popping there. Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
This sounds like so much fun to drive.
Yeah, I mean, it's 2,400 pounds roughly, 300 horsepower easily, you know, on a base map, on a, you know, a conservative map. And like I said, no power steering, no power brakes, no ABS. So you're driving it like a go-kart all the time, and you know, it makes you it makes you respect the dudes that race these cars wheel to wheel properly, because they really threw it all out there. So
I wish we featured this earlier so I could have got a ride with you.
yeah, so we actually gave a ride to one of the reporters from ESPN on Thursday. 2 laps around here, an out lap and 1 flyer and an in, and he got over the wall and basically puked right away.
No way.
He's like, I'm like, you want to go for another lap? He's like, no, get me out of this car. And yeah, I felt bad. He was totally cool with it. He said it was the experience, but yeah, it's a pretty visceral car. A lot of vibrations, a lot of feel, you know, it slides around a lot. You got to get comfortable letting the car slide, but it's also pretty quick. I mean, we're running sub-minute laps here. So, I mean, it's pretty cool to be out there actually wheeling the car properly, you know?
So then what fuel does it run?
So right now we're running VP 100 in it, just to be safe with the tune. We can run 93, but just to be safe, it's, you know, cheap insurance sometimes just to run better fuel. So we're running VP 100 in it, still unleaded, but yeah, we have maps for both.
Does it still open?
Yep.
Did they open on the race cars?
Yeah, so all the doors opened on the race cars, which is pretty cool. And you know, one of the reasons we built this car is, you know, we were racing some AMG GT4s and IMSA at the time, and it was like the new cars are really cool, but they lack this authenticity, right? Like anyone can go buy an expensive race car and race it. This car was my sort of opposite of that, where like, hey, let's build something that people can't buy, but is so authentic and just matters to the people that love this stuff.
Well, thank you so much for showing us this build.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for, you know, asking about and checking it out. We love to share this stuff, so we have a lot more cool things coming.
I love it. Can you start it so I can hear it?
Absolutely. It's actually pretty lackluster from a starting point of view, because it's just a little modern turbocharged engine, so it just kind of clicks around. But
it was so cool to see you and the Volvo out on track.
yeah, this is like just normal Mercedes Econobox, like maybe the better version of an Econobox. You know, we used a lot of different parts from our catalog in this, so you know, this is a Volvo intercooler, it's a BMW steering rack, that's a Volkswagen cooling reservoir. You know, we basically pick and chose a bunch of things from different cars to piece it together, which was our big advantage of building it, you know, at our facility with our parts distribution network right behind it. We're picking ball joints and doing things like that, so a lot of fun.
Did you limit the windshield wiper on purpose?
Yeah, so it's a mono wiper normally. Right now, we have it just set over to the side because we didn't obviously want to. Normally in DTM, they would actually, I can force this over. Normally they'd run it right there, which is the most aerodynamic way you can have your windshield wiper on your windshield. You know, so when you're racing around the Nürburgring and you're looking for a half a mile an hour to beat the BMWs, those are the things they would do. And I really, you know, I'm a self-proclaimed touring car nerd. I love touring cars. I've read so many stories about them, and you know, I've raced them in my life, and I love driving them, and whether it's new stuff or old stuff, but like something about the humble, sort of normal, everyday car, turned race car, is just so special. And I think it's something that so many people identify with, whether it's rally or touring car, but it's something really cool.
What a lot of people don't realize is those touring cars of that era still retain so much of the interior, so much of the stock vehicle.
Yeah, I mean, anything pre like early 90s, you know, they were forced to, you know, a lot of this stuff. And you look at Group A regulations and stuff, and they had to like homologate everything they used, and that's when we see like the Evos and the homologation specials start to come out. But there's a lot of rules they had to sort of go through to get these cars out there, and you see the formula of the cars starting to shift around, where it's like, what engine size are we going to use? What are we like? They're starting to actually dictate them. It was when motorsport dictated the engineering of the car, versus now it feels a little bit more like motorsport is just a marketing opportunity, but the car is going to be made the way the car is going to be made.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you want to support us directly, go to LarryChenPrints.com. I print and sign every single one of these. This is the perfect gift, or it's the perfect piece of art for your wall.